Marcus Chen had always been different from other kids in his neighborhood. While they played video games or hung out at the mall, Marcus spent his afternoons and evenings at the Dragon's Breath Martial Arts Academy. The dojo became his second home, and Master Kim became like a father to him. Marcus started training when he was just 8 years old, after his parents grew worried about bullies at school picking on their quiet, bookish son. What began as a way to build confidence quickly became an obsession. Marcus threw himself into learning every technique, every form, every philosophical teaching that Master Kim shared. He memorized the history of Taekwondo, practiced his kicks until his legs ached, and spent hours perfecting his balance and flexibility. Other students came and went, but Marcus remained constant, showing up even when he was sick or had mountains of homework waiting. By the time Marcus turned 16, he had earned his black belt through years of disciplined training in countless tournaments. The black belt ceremony was the proudest moment of his life. His parents beamed from the audience as Master Kim tied the coveted black fabric around his waist. Marcus felt invincible that day, like he had unlocked some secret power that made him superior to ordinary people. The feeling only grew stronger as Marcus continued his training. He began winning regional competitions, his bedroom walls filling with gold and silver medals. Local newspapers wrote articles about the young martial arts prodigy from their town. His high school classmates looked at him with newfound respect, and some even with fear. Marcus loved the attention, the way people stepped aside in the hallways, the way his reputation preceded him wherever he went. But success began to change Marcus in ways that Master Kim noticed with growing concern. The humble, eager student who used to bow respectfully to everyone slowly transformed into someone who carried himself with arrogance. Marcus started talking back during lessons, questioning techniques that had been refined over centuries and showing off unnecessarily during sparring sessions with lower-ranked students. Remember, Marcus, Master Kim would often say, "A true martial artist uses their skills to protect others, not to intimidate them. The strongest fighter is one who never needs to fight." Marcus would nod and agree, but inside he rolled his eyes. He thought Master Kim was just spouting old-fashioned philosophy that didn't apply to the real world. Marcus believed his black belt made him special, different from regular people who couldn't defend themselves. He started looking for opportunities to demonstrate his superiority, whether it was at school, in shopping centers, or anywhere he thought someone might challenge his authority. The problem started small. Marcus would stare down anyone who looked at him wrong, use his intimidating presence to cut in line, or make comments about how easily he could handle anyone who annoyed him. His friends began to feel uncomfortable around him, and several started avoiding him altogether. His girlfriend Sarah tried talking to him about his changing attitude, but Marcus dismissed her concerns as jealousy of his achievements. At school, Marcus became known as someone you didn't want to cross. He never actually hurt anyone, but his reputation and constant hints about his fighting abilities were enough to make most people back down from any potential conflict. Teachers noticed the change too, but since Marcus maintained good grades and never technically broke any rules, they couldn't take direct action. Marcus's parents tried to address his growing arrogance during family dinners, but he would argue that they didn't understand what it meant to have real power. He felt they were trying to hold him back from embracing his true potential. In his mind, he had worked harder than anyone else to earn his abilities, so he deserved the respect and fear that came with them. The situation reached a breaking point during Marcus's senior year of high school. He had been accepted to several colleges, but he was more focused on planning a graduation trip to Europe with some friends. Marcus had always dreamed of traveling, and the idea of experiencing different cultures while carrying his martial arts expertise excited him. He imagined himself as some kind of international man of mystery, someone who could handle any situation that arose. His friends were initially excited about the trip, but as the planning progressed, they became increasingly worried about Marcus's attitude. He talked constantly about how European people were probably weaker than Americans, how he could protect the group from any trouble, and how he was looking forward to showing off his skills in a new environment. Sarah refused to go on the trip, telling Marcus she didn't want to be around him when he was acting so aggressive and superior. Despite the concerns of those around him, Marcus was determined to make the trip happen. He had saved money from his part-time job at a local gym, where he taught basic self-defense classes to children, and occasionally filled in as an assistant instructor. Even at work, his colleagues noticed his increasing cockiness, but the gym owner kept him on, because he was technically skilled, and the kids seemed to learn well from him. Master Kim made one final attempt to reach his former star student before the trip. He invited Marcus for a private training session, hoping to remind him of the values and principles that martial arts were supposed to instill. During their conversation, Master Kim shared stories about ancient warriors who lost everything because they let pride and arrogance cloud their judgment. "Marcus," Master Kim said seriously, "I'm worried about you. Your technique is excellent, but your heart has changed. Martial arts should make you more humble, not less. The strongest people I know are also the gentlest, because they understand the responsibility that comes with their abilities." Marcus listened politely, but internally he felt frustrated that even Master Kim seemed to be trying to hold him back. He thought his teacher was just jealous that his student had surpassed him in confidence and ambition. Marcus thanked Master Kim for the lesson, but left feeling more determined than ever to prove that his way of thinking was correct. The night before leaving for Europe, Marcus packed his bags with excitement and anticipation. He included several of his martial arts uniforms and his black belt, thinking he might have opportunities to train or demonstrate his skills while abroad. He also packed books about European history and culture, though he was more interested in the sections about famous fighters and warriors than the art or literature. His parents drove him to the airport with mixed emotions. They were proud of their son's achievements and excited for his opportunity to travel, but they couldn't shake their concerns about his attitude and behavior. His mother hugged him tightly at the departure gate and whispered, "Remember who you really are, Marcus. Remember what we taught you about treating others with respect." Marcus hugged her back and promised to be careful, but his mind was already focused on the adventures ahead. He couldn't wait to explore Europe as a confident, capable martial artist who could handle anything that came his way. As the plane took off, Marcus stared out the window and imagined all the ways he might get to demonstrate his superior skills during the trip. He had no idea that his overconfidence was about to lead him into a situation that would change his perspective on martial arts, respect, and humility forever. The lessons that Master Kim had tried to teach him were about to be delivered in a much harsher way than either of them could have imagined. The flight to London was Marcus's first time traveling internationally, and despite his outward confidence, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as the plane descended through the clouds. His two friends, Jake and Tommy, had been unusually quiet during the flight, still uncomfortable with Marcus's recent behavior, but hoping the trip might help him relax and return to his old self. London exceeded all of Marcus's expectations. The ancient architecture, the bustling crowds, the accents he had only heard in movies, everything felt like stepping into a different world. The group stayed in a small hostel near the city center, and Marcus immediately began planning their itinerary with the enthusiasm of someone who wanted to see and do everything possible. During their first few days, Marcus maintained relatively good behavior. He was too amazed by the sights and sounds of London to focus much on asserting his dominance over anyone. They visited the Tower of London, rode the London Eye, and explored countless museums and historical sites. Marcus found himself particularly fascinated by the displays of medieval weapons and armor, imagining how his modern martial arts training would compare to the fighting techniques of ancient warriors. But as the group became more comfortable with their surroundings, Marcus's old habits began to resurface. He started making loud comments about British people being less physically imposing than Americans, bragged to other hostel guests about his black belt, and generally carried himself with the same arrogance that had been building for months back home. The first real incident happened at a pub on their fourth night in London. A group of local young men at the next table had been drinking and talking loudly, occasionally glancing over at Marcus and his friends with curiosity about the obvious American tourists. When one of them accidentally bumped into Marcus while walking to the bathroom, Marcus immediately stood up and confronted him. "Watch where you're going," Marcus said aggressively, stepping into the man's personal space. The British man, clearly confused by the hostility, apologized politely and tried to continue on his way. But Marcus wasn't satisfied. He wanted everyone in the pub to see that he wasn't someone to mess with, regardless of being in a foreign country. "Maybe you need to learn some respect," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder. "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." Jake and Tommy quickly intervened, pulling Marcus back to their table and apologizing to the confused British man. They were embarrassed by their friend's behavior and worried that he might start an international incident. The rest of the evening was tense. with Marcus muttering about how people in England needed to learn proper manners while his friends tried to change the subject. Over the next few days, similar incidents occurred with increasing frequency. Marcus would overreact to minor inconveniences, make inappropriate comments about his fighting abilities, and generally behave like someone looking for a fight. His friends began avoiding certain activities and locations, worried that Marcus might cause serious trouble that could ruin their trip, or worse, the situation came to a head during their planned visit to Buckingham Palace. Marcus had been particularly excited about this destination, not because of its historical significance or royal importance, but because he wanted to see the famous guards and their elaborate uniforms. He had joked repeatedly about how the guards probably weren't real fighters, just ceremonial decorations who looked impressive but couldn't actually defend anything. The day was beautiful and clear, with hundreds of tourists gathered outside the palace gates taking photographs and watching for any sign of activity. Marcus and his friends joined the crowd, cameras ready, hoping to witness the changing of the guard ceremony that was scheduled for later that afternoon. As they waited, Marcus became increasingly restless and attention-seeking. He started doing stretches and basic martial arts movements in the open space, hoping to impress the tourists around them. Several people stopped to watch, some taking photos of the young American demonstrating his flexibility and technique. Marcus loved the attention and began showing off more elaborate kicks and punches, his movements becoming more dramatic and space-consuming. "Marcus, maybe you should calm down a bit," Tommy whispered nervously. "This is a pretty formal place." But Marcus was enjoying himself too much to listen. He felt like he was giving these sheltered tourists a glimpse of real power and athleticism. In his mind, he was representing American martial arts expertise to an international audience, and he wanted to make sure everyone understood his capabilities. The Royal Guard stood at their posts with perfect stillness, their red uniforms immaculate and their expressions completely neutral. Marcus found their disciplined silence both impressive and irritating. He couldn't understand how someone could stand so still for so long, and he began to view it as a sign of weakness rather than strength. These weren't real warriors, he decided. They were just actors in costumes, playing dress-up for tourists. As the crowd grew larger and more excited about the approaching ceremony, Marcus became increasingly bold in his movements. He started practicing high kicks that brought his feet dangerously close to other tourists, forcing people to step back and give him more space. Some viewers applauded his demonstrations, which only encouraged him to attempt more impressive techniques. "Look at those guards," Marcus said loudly to his friends, pointing toward the palace entrance. "I bet they've never seen real martial arts before. They probably think their little ceremony makes them tough, but they wouldn't last 5 minutes against someone who actually knows how to fight." Jake tried to shush him, looking around nervously at the other tourists who were starting to stare at their group with disapproval. But Marcus was on a roll, feeding off the attention and the sense of superiority he felt in this historic, formal setting. That's when he noticed one particular guard who seemed to be looking in his direction. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, standing perfectly still in his traditional uniform, but Marcus thought he detected a hint of disdain in the guard's eyes. In reality, the guard was simply doing his job, maintaining awareness of the crowd while remaining completely professional. But Marcus interpreted the look as a challenge. "See that guy?" Marcus pointed directly at the guard. "He thinks he's so tough just because he's wearing that fancy outfit. I bet he's never been in a real fight in his life." The crowd around them began to murmur with discomfort. Most tourists understood that the royal guards were not entertainment, and that showing them disrespect was inappropriate. But Marcus was too caught up in his own performance to notice the changing mood around him. What happened next would replay in Marcus's mind for years to come. Driven by arrogance, anger, and a desire to prove his superiority, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He decided to show everyone, including the guard himself, exactly what a real fighter could do. Without warning or provocation, Marcus suddenly executed a perfect high kick directly toward the royal guard's head. His technique was flawless, his form textbook perfect, his speed impressive. For a split second, he felt the satisfaction of demonstrating his superior skills in front of an international audience. The guard, trained in ways that Marcus could never have imagined, reacted with lightning speed and devastating efficiency. What followed was not a martial arts demonstration or a friendly sparring match. It was a professional soldier neutralizing a perceived threat to the royal family and the crown, with the full force of his training and authority. Marcus found himself on the ground faster than he could process what had happened. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and the shocked gasps from the crowd seemed to come from very far away. As he lay there struggling to breathe and understand what had just occurred, Marcus realized that his black belt, his tournaments, his confidence, and his sense of superiority meant absolutely nothing in this moment. The guard had returned to his position as if nothing had happened, but within seconds, more security personnel appeared from nowhere, surrounding Marcus and his terrified friends. The situation had escalated beyond anything any of them had imagined possible, and Marcus was about to learn that actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve attacking representatives of the British Crown. The moments immediately following Marcus's attack felt like they lasted forever. As he lay on the ground, gasping for air and trying to understand what had just happened to him, the world around him exploded into controlled chaos. Within 30 seconds, Marcus found himself surrounded by more security personnel than he had ever seen in one place. The Royal Guards, he quickly learned, were not just ceremonial figures in fancy uniforms. They were elite soldiers from prestigious regiments, like the Grenadier Guards, Coldstream Guards, and Welsh Guards, men who had served in combat zones around the world, trained in hand-to-hand combat, firearms, and threat neutralization. The guard Marcus had attacked was a decorated veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and could have killed him with his bare hands if the situation had warranted it. Instead of the admiration and respect Marcus had expected for his martial arts display, he found himself face down on the pavement with his arms twisted behind his back, completely helpless and in excruciating pain. The crowd that had been watching his earlier demonstrations now stared in horror and disgust at what they had just witnessed. Children were crying, parents were pulling their families away, and tourists were frantically trying to capture the incident on their phones. "Don't move," commanded a voice with authority that cut through Marcus's shock and pain. "You are under arrest for assault on a member of Her Majesty's Guard, public disorder, and suspected terrorist activity." The word terrorist hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his arrogance and stupidity, he had never considered how his actions might be interpreted by security forces whose job was to protect the royal family from genuine threats. To them, he wasn't a martial arts enthusiast showing off. He was a foreign national who had just launched an unprovoked attack on a representative of the Crown in one of the most sensitive locations in the country. Jake and Tommy watched in absolute horror as their friend was hauled to his feet by multiple officers, his face bloodied and his expensive martial arts clothes torn and dirty. They tried to approach him, to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but they were immediately ordered to step back and provide identification. The situation had escalated far beyond anything they could have imagined when they planned their innocent graduation trip. As Marcus was dragged away from Buckingham Palace in handcuffs, with sirens wailing and crowds of tourists staring, the full weight of his actions began to sink in. This wasn't a sparring match in a controlled dojo environment. This wasn't a tournament with rules and referees. This was real life, with real consequences. And he had just assaulted a member of one of the world's most elite military units, in front of hundreds of witnesses. The ride to the police station was a blur of pain and confusion. Marcus's ribs ached from where the guard had neutralized him. His pride was completely shattered, and his mind raced as he tried to figure out how he could possibly explain his actions to anyone. The officer sitting beside him remained completely silent, treating him with the professional coldness reserved for suspected criminals. At the station, Marcus was processed like any other arrestee. His fingerprints were taken, his photograph was captured from multiple angles, and his personal belongings were confiscated and catalogued. The duty sergeant who handled his intake showed no sympathy for his situation, treating the assault on a royal guard as a serious criminal matter that could result in years of imprisonment. "You have the right to contact the American embassy," the sergeant informed him matter-of-factly. "You'll also be provided with a solicitor if you cannot afford one. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully with our investigation, because what you did today is not taken lightly in this country." The cell they placed Marcus in was small, cold, and completely unlike anything he had ever experienced. The reality of his situation began to truly hit him as he sat on the hard bench, still wearing his torn clothes and nursing his injuries. He wasn't a martial arts champion anymore. He wasn't a confident young man on an exciting European adventure. He was a criminal, locked in a foreign jail, facing charges that could destroy his future. His first phone call was to the American Embassy, where a duty officer listened to his story with professional detachment and growing concern. Embassy staff dealt with American citizens who got into trouble abroad on a regular basis, but attacking a royal guard was far more serious than typical tourist mishaps. They promised to send a representative, but warned Marcus that the embassy's ability to help him would be limited given the severity of the charges. Jake and Tommy, meanwhile, were dealing with their own crisis. They had been questioned extensively by police. Their hostel room had been searched, and they were told they might not be allowed to leave the country until the investigation was complete. Both young men called their parents in tears, trying to explain how their fun graduation trip had turned into an international incident. The solicitor assigned to Marcus's case was a middle-aged woman named Patricia Wells, who specialized in defending Americans who found themselves in legal trouble in the UK. She reviewed the police reports, witness statements, and security footage with the practiced eye of someone who had seen many young people make catastrophic decisions while traveling abroad. Mr. Dang Saboria. "Chen," she said during their first meeting, "I need you to understand the severity of your situation. The Crown Prosecution Service is treating this as an assault on a representative of the monarchy, which carries significant penalties. The security footage clearly shows you initiating an unprovoked attack. There were hundreds of witnesses. The guard you attacked is a decorated war veteran. This is not a case we can fight on the merits." Marcus sat in stunned silence as she explained the charges against him. Assault on a police officer or military personnel in the UK carried a maximum sentence of 6 months in prison and substantial fines. Given that he had attacked a royal guard at Buckingham Palace, prosecutors might seek the maximum penalty to send a message about the consequences of such behavior. "What about self-defense?" Marcus asked weakly. "What about my martial arts training? Doesn't that count for anything?" Wells looked at him with the patient expression of someone explaining reality to a confused child. "Mr. Chen, you attacked an innocent man who was doing his job. There was no threat to you, no provocation, no justification whatsoever for your actions. Your martial arts training is actually going to work against you because it demonstrates that you knew your actions could cause serious harm." Over the following days, as Marcus remained in custody, awaiting his court appearance, the full consequences of his actions continued to unfold. The incident had been captured on dozens of phones and security cameras, and videos of arrogant American attacks Royal Guard began spreading across social media platforms worldwide. News outlets picked up the story, portraying Marcus as an example of entitled American tourists behaving badly abroad. Back home, the story reached Marcus's hometown newspaper, his high school, and eventually Master Kim's dojo. When Master Kim saw the footage of his former student attacking the guard, he felt a deep sadness and responsibility for not having done more to address Marcus's growing arrogance. The reputation of the Dragon's Breath Martial Arts Academy was damaged by association, and several parents withdrew their children from classes. Marcus's parents were devastated. They flew to London immediately, spending thousands of dollars they didn't have on emergency travel and legal fees. When they finally saw their son in the visiting room at the detention center, he was no longer the confident young man who had left for Europe. He was broken, scared, and finally beginning to understand the true magnitude of his mistakes. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered to his parents through tears. "I thought I was so tough, so special. I thought my black belt made me better than everyone else. I was wrong about everything." The court hearing was a humbling experience beyond anything Marcus had ever imagined. Standing before a British judge in a formal courtroom, surrounded by legal professionals and court officers, Marcus felt smaller and more insignificant than he ever had in his life. The prosecutor read a detailed account of his actions, the harm he had caused, and the serious nature of attacking a member of the Royal Guard. When it came time for Marcus to speak, he could barely find his voice. The confident young man who had been so eager to demonstrate his superiority was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the difference between martial arts as a discipline and martial arts as a tool for ego and violence. "Your Honor," Marcus said quietly, "I know there's no excuse for what I did. I was arrogant and disrespectful, and I dishonored everything my martial arts training was supposed to teach me. I attacked an innocent man who was just doing his job, and I embarrassed my country and my family. I'm deeply sorry, and I want to spend the rest of my life making up for this mistake." The judge, who had seen many young people make poor decisions, was struck by what seemed to be genuine remorse from the defendant. After consulting with both legal teams and reviewing Marcus's background, she sentenced him to 4 months in prison, a substantial fine, and deportation back to the United States with a lifetime ban from returning to the United Kingdom. As Marcus was led away to begin his sentence, he caught one last glimpse of his parents in the courtroom gallery. Their faces showed a mixture of love, disappointment, and hope that their son might finally learn from this devastating experience. For the first time since receiving his black belt, Marcus felt truly humble, truly aware of how little he actually knew about strength, respect, and what it meant to be a martial artist. His time in British prison was unlike anything he could have imagined. Surrounded by actual criminals who viewed his attack on a royal guard as particularly stupid and disrespectful, Marcus found himself at the bottom of the social hierarchy. His martial arts skills meant nothing in an environment where reputation was built on respect and intelligence rather than physical intimidation. When Marcus was finally deported back to the United States, he returned as a completely different person than the one who had left. His dreams of college were complicated by his criminal record, his friendships were strained or destroyed, and his relationship with martial arts was fundamentally changed. But he also returned with something he had never possessed before: true humility and an understanding of what Master Kim had been trying to teach him all along. The young man who had once thought his black belt made him untouchable had learned the hardest possible lesson about respect, consequence, and the true meaning of strength.